And it is time for The Way It Is. Joining us in studio, as always, Hassan, Omar, Mombasa Senator. We have Benji, Ndolo, founder of One, Bruce Weda, prominent city lawyer. Welcome, gentlemen. I feel like I've not seen you guys, and I have not seen you guys for a very long time. It is good to see you.
Thank you. Absolutely.
How have you been? I know you've been traveling.
I was in the US.
Yes.
Washington, Boston, Seattle, Los Angeles. Yeah. I mean, it was a blitz trying to reignite some sister city partnership we have with the Mombasa County government. So in the spirit of good working relationship with my governor, he invited me so that we can go and pitch for Mombasa collectively, because we realized that there is strength in that type of a pitch. But what concerned us most, and maybe we should discuss that later, is how 27 billion shillings of drugs. Something is wrong somewhere in this country, somewhere. Fundamentally, these are the gaps that has compromised our security so much in all fronts, be it counterterrorism, be it that. There's a major catastrophe.
All right. Benji, quick catch up.
Some will say Senator is showing off, but I'd have just argued.
You always show off, Benji. You always tell us so-and-so is your friend.
No.
Show off all the time.
But when I was in the US, this is what I'd have asked him to come back with some swag. Yeah, so just say you're in the States and what have you.
But he did.
Yeah, but I'm happy. It was nice to start the week last week without having to do TV. People don't realize TV is not easy. Yeah, it's fun, it's good, but it's not easy. So last week was a nice fresh break, yeah. And it's nice to see you guys.
Weda.
It was good. Saturday was my 44th birthday.
Oh,
hey, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Baba.
And I had a cake made of guinea fowl eggs.
Okay.
So I think I was the only one who had such a cake. Beautiful, very yellow, very nice.
Yeah.
And then I spent the day laying a basis for what I call the home stretch decade, the next 10 years. Where am I going to be? What is a senator? Are they going to vote me in as the president, or they will just want to toss me around? So I was laying a basis for that. That is it.
Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Are you saying you're going to COD?
No. They'll come over where the people are. Okay.
Speaking of court, today I think we've spent a lot of time focusing on the government and what they've done over the past 1 year, the cabinet secretaries, but not much on CORD, the minority official opposition, if you like. How would you evaluate their performance, 1 year on?
No, my self-assessment about CORD has been quite honest. That I think the country expected a lot more from us. And we took a lot of time to settle down based on the new arrangement under the new constitution. I think this is the first time we are testing this arrangement. Severally, there have been issues. Can a chairperson who's from CORD take questions on behalf of government based on if he's a chairperson of a committee? So I think the whole system was one that we needed to set into. But I think we have committed ourselves to a more robust engagement in and outside the House. Because if you have realized, the Jubilee machinery, based on the fact that it enjoys relative state power, is constantly out over weekends. Every weekend you're bombarded with Ruto in one Harambe, Uhuru in another thing, Kindiki saying his own things about the Senate, which sometimes we say is his own personal position, Murkomen on the other side. Yet CORD has not had similar engagement outside the House. And we realize that for you in the media, what is said over weekends apparently does matter. And I think that also is the engine upon which we keep our politics alive. And we spent quite some time with the party leader of ODM, who's also the coalition leader in Boston. And you wanted me to talk with it in a swag. Well. So that's Boston.
Yes.
And I think he also has taken a critical look in terms of some of the gaps that we need to address as we venture into this second year of elective politics. I think also my party leader, Kalonzo Musyoka, despite the controversy that
he
also has made a similar assessment. Senator Wetangula. In fact, we have also set up new committees within the minority that are our own committees that will be able to now be progressively looking at legislative processes and other engagements inside the Senate, inside the National Assembly. I believe they will do the same, but even critically also outside the purview of the Senate and the National Assembly.
Certainly the performance of CORD has been abysmal. CORD certainly could have done much better, but you've got to understand it in the light of the fact that the CORD leadership is not in the House, is not really part and parcel of the institutions, and so that has its own administrative challenges, and challenges that haven't been seen before, where you've got an amalgamation of political parties that are operating, you know, actually in two houses now, the National Assembly and the Senate, and while they are, you know, inspirational, ideological, political leaders, if you may, are nowhere on the floor and not able to caucus. So that obviously has had an impact, and I'm not sure in hindsight if it was very wise to keep the leadership outside of the House. Having said that, I also feel that the question, Sophia, is wrongly predicated, because you cannot elect or select a government and then seek to hold the opposition accountable for the failures and the lack of delivery of that government. So I think we've got to be careful.
But leadership, everybody has a role to play. So
that's true,
even if they're not government, doesn't say they don't have a role to play until they become government.
That's true.
Because
I'm just saying that it's wrong-headed, which is perhaps the trigger that led to this confrontation the other day between the CORD leadership and journalists, because I think there's a level of frustration inside of CORD, and you know, it's having to exist within the context and environment of tyranny of numbers and all of that, and now to have to be blamed for the obvious failures of the government.
Nobody is blaming.
But
well, that's how it comes out.
Agree with just before Amos, Ambrose, if you comment. I want to agree briefly with Benji. You cannot tell us the leadership has a collective responsibility in that regard. We have collective responsibilities in certain regards, but the people who control the vestiges of state power is the Jubilee coalition. They have appointed their cabinet, they have appointed their principal secretaries. Every other time when Uhuru speaks, even when he comes to deliver his one-year assessment in the state of the nation, he says the Jubilee government, the Jubilee government, the Jubilee government. We have, you can hold us accountable to governments that we have at the county level. And in fact, we have governments at county levels that then must also demonstrate. And I think the flagship counties that you talk about constantly, Machakos and others, are predominantly CORD counties.
I think for the first, on one of the rare occasions, I would agree with Ndolo. The CORD have done very well at funerals. Chaos and propaganda, and the last one was a dance, Orengo and Obado in Migori, and the other one you saw Wetangula. I believe they have failed in this respect. One, they have not introduced even a quota legislation in the National Assembly or in the Senate to streamline things. Even if you look at the way they debate some of the bills that may come from the Jubilee government that are not very proper, they are not there. And outside, you do not see their alternative view where they say, if we were in government, we would have been doing this, and this is big done wrongly like this. They only specialize in criticizing. In a country that is developing, it needs all of us. It needs all our brains. At least you share and say, you've done it wrong, this is the correct way. But they also don't have the correct way. So they are waiting just to criticize, which is not good for this country. If you look at like the Republicans in America, they have a view, they have a direction. They want a way things should run. Here, CORD is just CORD, you know, just CORD like that.
Republicans are not a good example because they're classic obstructionists. So
in fact, I was just they are such a they were engaged in a campaign of smear. They have no alternative view. They have no alternative leadership. they are disenfranchised. They are
let's bring this home, because
but coming to that, what happens in funerals? Most of the Jubilee plebiscites also do happen in funerals. In fact, I totally shared with Father Gabriel Dolan that we must rescue funerals from politicians. I think a few years back, or even during the one-party rule, it was a means that was used as a platform for expression, because it was difficult to mobilize constituencies for you to address. So it became a strategic avenue. But I think, I personally, have you heard me speak in a funeral? It is a very deliberate, conscious choice. And I think families must spare themselves.
It's prohibited by law.
Must spare themselves. This whole, pandemonium of having senators, governors, whoever they are, coming to speak to funerals. If they cannot mobilize their own political constituencies or their own rallies, they should not do it at the expense of funerals. I really appreciated Father Dolan's commentary that whoever went to Bishop Lele, a great guy's funeral over the weekend, or the last weekend, the politicians were not given an opportunity to speak. Only somebody read a message on behalf of President Kenyatta, and that was about it. And I think it should remain that way.
It should remain that way. Let's talk about a platform that was created by CODE last week to address the issues that brought up by a documentary aired by KTN Jichopevu, and most importantly, discuss the IEBC and how it all went down
haywire
after that. I don't know if you watched that.
I definitely, we were waiting for it. And the internet connectivity on that other side of the globe is fairly fast. Yeah. So we were able to watch your entire,
super fast.
The entire.
Someone tell Kalonzo. Someone tell it went from discussing the government and holding the government into accountability, and went to Kalonzo and how he.
Maybe just before he comes to Kalonzo.
If I could go first.
Just before he comes to Kalonzo, and then I can pass it over to Benji. I agree with the CODE position. You see, it is not whether the IBC is whatever position it is immaterial. Their legitimacy. You see, a commission of that caliber must almost be pontifical. It must be above reproach. The credibility of you running an electoral process must be that both sides of the contest.
As it stands now, Hassan, that conversation has been lost. Do you realize that?
Because of Kalonzo's...
Yes.
You wanted to go first?
Let me go first because I was in Kenya, and then...
Please.
And he's also a Wiper elected representative. Then maybe he can follow, dispute or buttress what I'm saying. What happened to Honorable Kalonzo last week is what Australian neurologist Sigmund Freud called a Freudian slip. And basically, for me as an analyst and as an observer, it's a fantastic opportunity to understand the opposition, to understand why we still have a divided country, so to speak, and why Jichopevu is so controversial. The fact of the matter is that CORD leadership, two things. Number one, they do not believe smart that they lost fair and square. You might not like it, you might not want to condone it, but Raila and Kalonzo do not feel that in a free and fair fight, they would lose to Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. And so these guys have constituencies, they have regions and supporters that they represent. And so that is from where you see this kind of anger transmitting itself in this way. Secondly, there have been many things that have led to this kind of situation. Number one, the president has said clearly that he will rule for 10 years and his deputy would rule for another 10 years. Now, this is on the back of a proclamation, very public, that we are under something called tyranny of numbers. That if you mobilize this community and that community and keep them together, then you basically close everyone else
So
out.
you're justifying Kalonzo's remark?
I'm explaining those remarks.
Where
because
he came from? Okay.
As one of the top 5 political leaders in this country, as the immediate former vice president, as a leader of CORD, these comments then cause a lot of shock and angst and continue to trend and refuse to go away.
Before you continue, did you watch
this
the
is
clip?
very important because
Benji, important, but did you watch the clip by KTN? It's not the first time. Because if you're trying to give this conversation or what the government has been saying as background and, justification for what he said, it's not the first time Kalonzo has made such a remark after a question has been raised by somebody pointing to their ethnicity or whatever view they may hold to be the grounds by which they raise certain questions.
What I'm saying, Sophia, is that, and I'm not here to justify anything, I'm here to analyze and explain so that Kenyans understand where we're coming from.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that as we do elections in this country, and votes are coming from Nyanza, votes are coming from Ukambani, it is pretty obvious to all of us Kenyans where those votes, in which basket those votes are going. Is it right to propagate ethnic mobilization? No. Is it the reality? Yes. And so what the former VP said is basically the reality that we are in today, and is a reflection of the anger, the despondence, if you may, the resistance of his community against other regions of the country that have made similar proclamations in different ways. For example, tyranny of numbers. And one of the best testaments to this was the Makueni by-election of the late Senator Mutula Kilonzo, where the government was absolutely 100% unable to make inroads. Philip Kaloki was a candidate there, is my personal friend. He was absolutely unable to make any campaign step once the electorate determined that he was representing the oppressors, so to speak. And so I think that this was a spark necessary for us to have, inadvertent as it may be, necessary for us to have the pertinent conversation that we must as a country.
Let's bring in Weda before.
I think when it comes to the question of negative ethnicity, we should not live in denial. Let us look at where Kalonzo is coming from. Kalonzo, what came out of his mouth is what his heart is full of, and it is bitterness. Kalonzo, I think, feels that after supporting Kibaki, the Kikuyus were supposed to support him. Okay? He went with Kibaki at the most difficult time. And
when he needed him the most.
When they needed him the most, when it looked like he betrayed his principles, he betrayed the other part of the country. So he felt after Kibaki, and he may have been told after this gentleman. You get it? So after Kibaki, having known that with the backing of the Kikuyu people, because of their numbers we deny it, we live in denial, there are many, he would be sure enough to be nearer the presidency. So failing to back him, the bitterness still goes there. So when a journalist asks a question, and the question that appears to be supportive of the Jubilee system, because the question was, you are just criticizing, is there the other side? Then he has to look at who is talking. That must be a Kikuyu. That bitterness is there. And that causing the question, how do we address the welling up? Because I have said in this program, the COD areas are closing up. The bitterness continues. And you can see the bitterness being directed against IBC. They feel it is IBC that made them lose. But in any contest you have had every day, there is no loser who will come to this studio and tell you, I lost fairly. It is only I won, but my votes were stolen. Or I won this and that. All of us have been in election. Whenever I lose, I say I was robbed of victory. So if you look at the dynamics, if you look at the mathematics, maybe COD may say the 7,000 that made Jubilee get 50% plus 1. You could have removed a vote here, vote there, vote here, vote there, then you reduce the 7,000. But the 800,000 votes, surely if you take that, then you cannot fault the IBC so much. And then finally on the IBC, what they had to do, within the period they had to do it, and in the context that there were bound to be mistakes. And even in court, when you look at an election, you don't look for a perfect election. You say the irregularities that were they so much as to affect the outcome? So looking at it, the IEBC in the difficult circumstances did what they did. maybe if you removed the 100 votes, you would have wiped out the 7,000. But the 800,000 was difficult to wipe out.
But James, that's exactly the point.
Yes.
That was not an experiment. Yes. That's really real life.
Yes.
If you have inadequacies, if you had all those kinds of logistical nightmares, yeah, the more important thing is to honestly acknowledge it before the public, in public. For you to give us an illusion that we were going to have a system of election that was flawless, only for you yourselves to be flawed even internally, it puts into question the legitimacy. There's what is called legitimate expectations. We went into that elections believing that there were 1, 2, 3 things that had been factored, and it is a contest that where 1 or 2 or 3 or 7,000 votes mattered, because the constitutional requirement says 50 plus 1. So that one vote mattered. So if that one vote was somehow, somewhere, as Weda said, maybe possibly a mistake somewhere, then that mistake was fatal. But secondly, coming to the Kalonzo debate, I'm very at home with that subject. I used to raise tantrums. I remember even Weda wrote an article once against me, and when I said that Kibaki should stop to ethnicize the state. What has happened is there has been a deliberate institutionalization of ethnicity in this country. Yes. And when you say it, there are burbs that come. For me, I've told guys, I no longer fear those burbs. In fact, I look at them with a smile when I see them in my social media. Because some things in this country must be said, bitter as they might be. Kalonzo, as a public figure, my own view is that he sometimes needs to contain those types of emotions. But he was very magnanimous to apologize immediately thereafter. And I want to accept his apology on the basis that it was genuine. These other idiots who are coming up, oh, apologize and do this and do that, are taking it too far. I think he has apologized. That closes the matter there. But I agree with Makau Mutua that Kalonzo might have been wrong, but stop the hypocrisy. There are hypocrites in this country who make it appear like, it is the first time, something of this nature. Particularly look at some of the people who had a field day in the social media. They are the same ethnic hypocrites. And for me, it is not even much what Kalonzo says. We must express similar outrage. When Kibaki, as he then was appointing people from the same ethnic group, and now Uhuru is literally following the same pattern. That's where the outrage must be. So let us not fear this type of conversation, because our country will not be built by hugging and cuddling. It will be built by genuine discourse. So hard as the opinions might appear, yeah, they must be said. Look at the fragmentation of the Jubilee government. Look at the appointments that are coming. And for me, that shows a definite dearth of statesmanship. The inability for Ruto and Uhuru to be statesmen has gotten this country severely polarized. Polarized in terms of ethnicity, coming from an election that we have not recovered 1 year down the line because they have made no effort. They have polarized this country based on their lack of strategy in a religious format. That shows their depth in terms of leadership. As people say, their only business that they do with perfection and precision is kutenda. Tender. Business orientation, they are extraordinary. Governance, severely wanted. That's why we are so polarized. It needed a leader who could raise above these issues.
And we don't have that. That's the truth.
No. Yeah. I think when you see
the national government.
My friend senator speaking passionately like the country is hot.
It is.
I don't
Which
think
country
it is
do you
that
live
hot.
in?
I don't think it is that hot. One thing I really would like us to look at, when you talk about the Kikuyu, we are actually dealing with fairly innocent people. If you look at even the appointments they are talking about, the country is normally divided between friends. I know quite a number of Kikuyus who are just suffering like any other Luo or Kishi. And I know the Luos were in the system. I am not a Kikuyu, but I'm on this side. Mm-hmm. So, negative ethnicity, the remark that was made by Honorable Kalonzo, I fault it on the basis that it balkanizes a group of people and makes other communities start hating. The hatred continues. Yet, majority of them are equally at sea. They wish they would meet that President Uhuru and tell Uhuru, if there is something you give to Omar, please give him, so that we are not. I saw in 2007, when members of the Kikuyu community had nowhere to run to.
Yeah,
Yet they themselves were saying, some of us voted for Raila, people like Kanja were for Raila, and so on. But nowhere. In Kisumu, in Bungoma, the Kikuyus had nowhere to run. So when a leader speaks like that, the venom continues. And the venom continues against innocent people.
If you can allow me to
this is,
give
let me just finish.
Yeah,
this is the part that I say should not take place. I accept Kalonzo's apology. Absolutely. I believe that the bitterness is out of bitterness, but we as a country must reconcile each other. We must remove the bitterness. And again, maybe the president and the deputy must see that this bitterness may lead us to a ditch.
But isn't that right in their doorstep, whether that they, as the custodians right now of state and power, should make sure that the rest of the country feels that this is their country too?
I agree.
The problem is, let me just before Weda answers, I want to just make one. You see, in Kenya, if we want to build a democracy, let's be harsh and honest to everybody in this country. Let's be harsh and honest to the Kambas. Let's be harsh and honest to the Luos. Let's be harsh and honest to the Kikuyus and everybody else. The majority of us have no problem. Actions of Raila and Raila. Why do you vote almost to the man as Luos for Raila? Why do you vote almost to the man as Kikuyus for Uhuru? Why do you vote almost to the man as Kambas? So that peasant mentality where you say that only a few of us are eating, yet you are the engine upon which it perpetuates that leadership. That's why you see everybody feels the obligation, be you Kamba, be you Somali, be you who, to vote for whoever it is. So first and foremost, we also need to demolish that peasant mentality, where you say it's only a few of us who are benefiting, but all of you become the basis upon which you sustain an ethnic hegemony. You know, that is so pervasive. So I think when we have these conversations, let us also be honest to the masses out there. Vote people for their programs, for their agenda, for their political beliefs, for their ideological inclines. Don't vote people just because his name resembles yours.
I think one thing that the Code Brigade are forgetting, if you take like the Code leader, Raila Odinga, he has a fanatical following of about 3 million adults. That translates to almost 10 or 15 million people in this country. So he's like a demigod. There are people who follow and take his word. There are people, if he told them, take up arms and go and beat up the Kikuyus, they will do it this morning. That goes also with Kalonzo Musyoka, that goes with Honorable Wetangula. Therefore, when it comes to national unity, when it comes to the ethnization of I'm sorry, as a Luo. When it comes to this, I feel very passionate about this, because when it comes to this, it is our responsibility totally.
But whether
you don't leave it as a president.
Hang on, I agree,
yes.
I agree.
Yes.
But
yes.
1 year after election,
yes.
that was split right in the middle.
Yes.
Yes. Was it not in President Uhuru's and Ruto's main agenda as item 1 to say,
yes.
you know what, my first job is
yes.
that I will be the president
yes.
of not only the people who voted for me, but
yes.
those who didn't vote for me?
Yes.
Is it not in their duty?
That is, ought and is their duty. It's their responsibility.
Yes.
But remember, they are working on it. There may be mistakes here and there. There may be...
Whether it's 1 year later, we're going to 2 years later, we cannot be making...
I'm smart. Let me come to the defense of Joaquin.
Let me finish. Allow me to finish. I have just narrated that there are people... The court side has almost half the country, and they're staying put. They're staying hard. They are saying we will not let our support... I was saying, Mr. President, here, you are not acting right, you are not uniting the country, you want the country united, you are not doing it. You find they have kept their people. When they go to funerals, it is negative, negative, negative. And this is a nascent presidency. It's still young presidency.
But definitely,
1 year.
Let's look for solutions to this.
Weda definitely is not looking at the court debates. He is not looking at the public pronouncements. CORD stood up and said at the appointment of the cabinet, at the appointment of cabinet principal secretaries, that these appointments are skewed. You do not disenfranchise or dispossess a people just because they did not vote for you. You now show gravitas. Let's just, today you've mentioned the Republicans. Let us just take Obama, for instance. He's an African American. How many African Americans are there in his cabinet? If you have already umekula nundu, that's what Waswahili wanasema. You have taken the lion's share by being the head of state, the president of the republic. You don't then need to appoint 6, 7 cabinet secretaries from your region. You can now use that avenue to ensure that you harness national unity. That's why then you can go to the next elections with a view saying that you are not dispossessed simply by the fact that you did not vote for me as president. So I can tell you, I was part of the engine of the Raila campaign, and the ideas we had about the cabinet, we told him, you will not appoint more than this number of people from your communities. You will make sure that you will create a cabinet. But that maybe was to be seen, because once people are in power, it's a different dynamic altogether. But if you continue to directly point out that it's only reward for those who voted for you from your ethnic regions and your ethnic communities, then it becomes difficult for CORD to regulate public conduct, because on the basis of that, when they take these appointees to Parliament, particularly the National Assembly, it's a rubber stamp, National Assembly. Who Aduale doesn't realize is a minority within a minority.
You were looking forward to the former Prime Minister, CORD leader, coming back, big celebration. That did not happen.
Because he extended his time.
Exactly. And the question is, now that he's extended his time, and there's been, a lot of people coming out to say now that he's away, there's lack of that kind of vibrancy in the opposition. Do you feel that that is affecting it? And why did he decide to stay away when,
I was with him for a few days. He disagrees with that. He believes people have done fairly well.
Really?
In terms of holding government to account, we have discharged our responsibilities equally and fairly, equitably. And what I think, was lacking was the kind of energy that Raila usually represents. And I think also the fraternity of the media loves the Raila card of politics. So it is more likely that you locate him. But I believe my party leader has been going around as much, Wetangula has been going around as much. But secondly, he extended because there were a lot of requests across universities in the US for him to go and give public lectures, to go and fraternize around certain discourses. And in fact, even the director of that school was saying that never has he received so many requests on a visiting, former head of state, head of government, or prime minister that he has with particularly Raila Odinga. So he processed their request and felt that to be away until probably May the 15th, particularly if some of us are here, he felt that the opposition does not stand to suffer.
Whether doesn't think that's the case, but let's also bring in another unfortunate incident.
It's not a question of whether things. I know.
You were with the Prime Minister.
Yes,
Thank you.
I know what I'm saying.
Let's move to another unfortunate incident. Boston Marathon. The Kenyan community in Boston organized a dinner for the Boston athletes and the CS Sports. Mr. Wario, and the ambassador of Kenya to the US, Jean Kamau, in the speech, up to give, their thanks and congratulate the team, was supposed to be there. And the former Prime Minister shows up, they refuse to show up.
That's petty and that's backward. But just before we come into that, allow me to share that I got a report yesterday on my phone that there's a commission, some sort of Communications Authority of Kenya, something like that. And that somebody can check this, that the last 7 shortlisted are all from one community. To come to Weda's aid, it's a bit difficult for the president to make any inroads.
That was a somber mood.
It's a little difficult for the president to make any inroads when parts of the country that are called are extremely resistant to the Jubilee agenda. And so, again, it comes down to one of the best examples I like to give, Wakili, from the 17th, 18th centuries. And that is, do you know that political contests used to be settled sometimes by a gun battle, so that you have a decisive victor? I'm not saying we can go back to that, but it really hurts the legitimacy of the government when CORD regions and CORD constituents do not believe that the other side won. It creates really a mammoth of a problem as far as your authority, legitimacy, and ability to reconcile the country, to have the mandate to go around the country, you know, properly, and to know that you're welcome and respected in those areas. So it is a problem. It is also a dangerous one in the long run, because we don't want to polarize this country and fill it with any more hate than is there. And the actions of the cabinet secretary and the ambassador do nothing to, you know, heal those wounds. And it's unfortunate that they reduce themselves to such pettiness. You know, just to abscond an event because the former prime minister is there is at best childish.
I think commenting on what may have happened in Boston, I assume that those two, the ambassador and the cabinet secretary, may have had better or serious reasons why they didn't show up. There could have been something, but if it is because Raila showed up, then they are not worth leading in this country.
Thank you.
That I would say straight. Because, you know, when people think that maybe President Uhuru and Raila are enemies, you would be shocked that, don't be shocked when one's son marries the other's daughter tomorrow, and you are busy fueling, thinking there's fire down here. They may be having political contests because they want power. But when we have finished elections as a country, and there's a national issue, the other day you saw the Westgate, all the leaders were there, and you could see Kenyans felt we were moving. That is, so if the cabinet secretary had other reason, good. If it is because Raila showed up, if I was the
James,
president,
I was there. I was there.
Let's get it from the first one.
I know he was on the program. They were both on the program. The Kenyan organizers there had expressed certain concerns that the Prime Minister is in Boston, and they could not allow him not to be part of that extraordinary event that everybody looks forward to annually, because, you know, Kenyan runners are in the business of winning. So everybody wants to come and dine with the champions. And the Prime Minister being within vicinity, it was only practical and reasonable that he's there. For me, Sophia, James, your boss, I think maybe it's Joe or maybe higher up, and you sometimes know what your boss thinks, and therefore you try to navigate around those kinds of turbulence. That's the reality of life. That shows the immaturity in the leadership that we have today. It demonstrates, I'm telling you, it demonstrates, these people know the classical feelings and emotions of its leadership. That's why when I
to
do
not
certain
even
things,
dine together just because
I also know the how to navigate around certain feelings of certain people who exercise a certain authority over us. And I think, you know, for me, I'm a senator. I cannot be sacked by anybody apart from the people of Mombasa County. So therefore, my robustness is much easier. But these days, you have ministers and civil servants, kinds of people looking for reconfirmations. I thought personally it was totally petty. It should not have happened.
Point of information: yes. The spokesman for the president, Isipisu, says the ambassador is in Kenya on leave. That is why she was not at the Boston event.
It is not true. The ambassador was in Boston. We met her even as we came back from that dinner that very evening and the next morning.
So
she flew to Kenya on Sunday on leave, and you can take that to the bank.
And to Esipisu, you can at least send a liaison officer.
Yes, absolutely.
If their boss is on
the
leave.
thing is, they were represented by members of their staff members, but they were in Boston. We met them, and I mean, unfortunately,
I think there seems to be reason seems to be coming out, but because Senator Omar was in Boston, he has arranged very good reasons that display the Jubilee administration and all these people in bad light. I think if they say there was a reason, there could have been a reason. And
SCP is lying there. I can tell him.
He's actually the government spokesperson.
But he's saying,
but
he's not saying the
I
truth.
agree that if they just missed, then it is unfair to the people of Kenya, unfair to the country. But
Lying is a bit harsh, Senator.
on the other hand, Raila should also notice that he's a senior citizen. He's at the Kibaki level.
So he shouldn't show up on events.
Get crashing sometimes. You know, and
I understand he was already in the program.
Hang on.
He
In
did
the
not
dailies.
get
He did not get crashed.
Listen,
the organizers of the event is usually Kenyans.
Yes.
And
The organizers of the event.
Wahome and team.
Yes.
Extended an invitation. They told him, Mr. Prime Minister, you are here. Please attend. You will add some color and flavor.
All right.
Please attend this particular function.
Final on this, the organizer of the event, Mr. Omar himself, was quoted in the local dailies. He said, what he wanted to do was have the names of the cabinet secretary and the ambassador on the printed timetable of the ceremony of the event. But we wanted the former prime minister to come, and we thought that if we had put his name on the timetable of events, then it would have gone haywire from the beginning. So they're trying to strike a balance, to have the former premier as a national leader to come through, and also the government represented in this Kenyan event.
And remember to share your views if you're watching this. The way it is the hashtag.
Hashtag on the way it is.
Yes.
Just for clarification, what was on the program?
What was the program was the cabinet secretary and the ambassador were on the program to speak.
So protocol was observed, and they didn't even respect that.
Now, let me tell you this.
Finals on this before you
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah, final.
We have like
Let me
10
tell you on
Discuss
this.
the drugs.
Yeah.
5
This
minutes
country
to
have
go.
to-
Me too.
We know the hot points. We know the hot areas. We should be live to it, as at now. There was a time you saw somebody in Sondo.
Soon.
Yes. Matere Kariri. Running physically. Do you remember?
Alive to the issues over the
So
facts of the day.
sometimes you are alive to the issues. If an organizer knows very well the hot issues about the former prime minister, the hot issues about the cabinet secretary, surely you don't arrange and say, Mr. Cabinet Secretary, you will come, the ambassador will come. Then behind the scenes you say, Raila will also show up. These are the things that keep on welling up the negativity.
Whatever the issues.
We should
Whatever the issues.
be live
a
to
cabinet
this and unleash
secretary,
it.
an
Final
ambassador
thoughts
of
on
any
this?
country must show gravitas.
Yeah.
He or she must discharge himself with the levels of impartiality that are required in his office, and respect institutions past and present, because in 10 years, if it gets there, and a big if, Uhuru is also going to be a former head of state. So you don't expect Benji Ndolo sitting in Washington saying that he's not going to receive him because he is of the former Jubilee.
All right.
That's pettiness.
Let's go to the
That
drugs
is
you have been mentioning.
Pardon?
Yes.
The drugs.
Let me go first, and then you can come in because you're a politician.
Because I'm politician,
because you're a
it was
politician.
intended, it emanates somewhere around from my area of jurisdiction.
We've got a big problem in this country. We've got drug dealing going on in this country. We obviously have this country as a route for trafficking. And we are at the risk, ladies and gentlemen, of becoming a narco state. As I've constantly said before, in the state of Mexico and countries like Cuba and elsewhere, you've had to have the intervention of the military when these drug gangs become so powerful, become so networked and have their own differences. And so this is absolutely and totally unacceptable. What is shocking is that on some of these key issues, the president as an individual has to come out forthrightly and fight this. It is quite disappointing that Australian authorities are the ones that had the necessary reconnaissance, the necessary intelligence, the necessary capacity to sniff this out, to intercept this. And you're talking about a haul worth almost $200 million. Worst case scenario, nobody is talking about it. It is only small fry like us here on morning shows, etc. Not people in the church, not people in cabinet, not people in the government, not law enforcement. This is absolutely terrible, and they're putting this country in peril. Drug dealing is no joke.
James, for
Yes,
me,
let's go to the...
this shows the gaps in the entire management of our country's security. The whole idea is about the way security is managed or mismanaged. First and foremost, personally, I hope that the Australian High Commissioner here and the Australian government will make full disclosure. For them, for even it to be reported that they did not put Kenyan authorities in the loop because of potential leakage of that information, is telling to the credibility and the integrity of the police service and our security agencies. Secondly, 27 billion shillings worth of drugs is not a small haul. That is Mombasa's annual budget 5 times over. We have a annual budget of 4.2 billion. That is 5 times over or 6 times over. It therefore shows that the market was not Kenya. It was not Mombasa. But for those traffickers to have that audacity, it means that it is not something that is a one-off. You see, you first have small trials until you are able to ascertain how that route, how that transit altogether fits into place. For us, we want a thorough investigation. We want a prosecution.
By who?
Australians are doing it. But they must now collaborate to a certain degree because there are certain things that are jurisdictional, whether we like it or not. The boats that were detained are boats that I'm reliably informed are registered within the Kenyan territory. So they are boats that essentially, when they are in the high seas, will have the Kenyan flag. So therefore, there is already territorial jurisdiction. There is need for Kenya also to share that kind of information and Australia to reciprocate. I was told the entire hull has been destroyed. So therefore, that said and done, at least we read it in the media, but the evidence was captured. So we hope in the next couple of days, we will see full disclosure, we will see robust prosecutions, and that also is a pointer that there is need for a concerted effort. What my brother Benji said, particularly when we were talking about Mexico, they had to literally create a paramilitary force.
Yeah.
That the 50,000 police officers and military officers to deal. We cannot allow citizens to fight a drug war. And I think this is an industry that supports the wealth of certain people. It has people who eat and live out of it. So therefore, to crack it, we'll need the commitment from the very top and everybody else in this country.
Yeah, I think it was shocking. But knowing the problem of drugs, you remember Chinedu?
Yeah.
We evicted him out of this country. He went to another friendly country. They detained our plane and said, you're not going back. That should show you that it is an international problem that is beyond local politics. It's also beyond Jubilee Code where you say, this has failed, this has failed. It is something that requires us to look at together because this affects us in our own houses, our own children, ourselves. But remember, it involves billions of shillings. It's not something that you go broadcasting. You understand? That is why it was quiet. I think that would be the reason why it was quiet. That's not something we go and say, now we hear some drugs are passing through. But this problem has brought down governments. It has brought down countries.
Yeah.
Even in the US, they can't deal with it because we are talking about billions of money. So the drug problem is for all of us. And we expect that our security agencies will go deeper into it. We know some are involved, some are against it. But we need, Senator Omar, we need each of us together. It is not against the police. Every morning the police, we cannot bash the police.
Here's the tragedy, guys.
Can I just make this comment?
Here's the tragedy.
The problem about
we cannot bash them in the morning.
He does not understand governance. This is the problem about being a lawyer and not understanding governance.
I thought
governance has certain means that there are certain people.
Senator.
There are certain people who are accorded certain responsibilities and must take responsibilities for inactions and failures, notwithstanding whichever party affiliation you come from.
Yes.
The Prime Minister of the Philippines has just resigned over the boat tragedy. That's how enormous in terms of how people take political responsibility.
We are not
people therefore must realize that eventually when this type of things happen, fingers will point to certain
Someone
people.
must take responsibility.
Absolutely. And you cannot always try to generalize.
Here's the tragedy.
That this is not
as we talk about governance, let me take you to the point.
This is real work.
Here's the tragedy, Smart. It is common knowledge that there are elements in mainstream politics and governance in this country whose names whether you talk about governors, members of parliament, former members of parliament, etc., whose names have been synonymous with the drug trade on the floor of parliament, in public discourse, in the media, etc. It is a disaster that drug dealing is happening in the first place, but that the proceeds of drug dealing are finding their way into mainstream politics and governance in this country. Colombia is the best example of what happens when drug dealing festers to where you have drug gangs executing senior police officers and even members of the military and paramilitary, as has been said. And so once again, my advice would be that these elements in government that obviously violate the tenets of the Constitution, that shouldn't be anywhere near participatory democracy and elective politics, they simply need to be brought to a stop. And we must say this early, because if we continue down this path, in another 15, 20 years, this country's smart will be unrecognizable.
Your final thoughts on this?
I think Senator is advocating for something happens, quit. Something happens, the quitting business. That's not, in my view, the way to do things.
Responsibility is different from quitting.
Yes, you're talking about...
So it says, but somebody has responsibility constitutionally in terms of the legal framework. You don't have to quit necessarily.
You look at you have just mentioned, Ndolo has mentioned about leaders. And I think Senator knows, when we are talking about governors, those who have been named consistently on this drug issue.
Some in Mombasa.
Some in Mombasa.
I want to mention Hassan. You see, let's say for instance, I know you want to talk about Hassan Joho.
No,
that's the truth of the matter. He talks about it himself because he was mentioned when in the floor of the House.
Yes.
I was just, and the people who had provided that evidence and said they'd banned him from traveling was the U.S. I'm just from a trip from the U.S. with the Hassan Joho, where he's been invited by several states.
Yes.
So rather than us dealing with, let's really deal with the elephant in the room. Let us look for the evidence where it is and prosecute people, not hearsay. And if anybody,
yes,
whether it's a Mombasa leader, whether it's any other leader, there's substantial evidence in terms of his dealings, yes, with particularly areas around drugs,
yes,
then he
but
or
let me
she must
caution
be
you, Senator,
prosecuted.
you won't find evidence easily because these are not fools. You won't find it.
Right.
They do consider
Gentlemen,
evidence.
let's
That's
take a
part of
short
the game.
break. Let's hang on to this story. It's getting a bit hot. Let's take a short break, but we'll be right back with you guys. Don't go.
Welcome back to Morning Express. We're glad you're watching. The Way It Is continues in a short while. Remember the hashtag to use?
The Way It Is.
Yes.
We will definitely take your thoughts in the next 15 minutes. Our panel is still in studio with us to take your questions, take your opinions.
Yeah.
All right, hashtag The Way It Is. Let's get this finished in the next 15 minutes.
Yes.
I want to say something about this drug thing because you just read to me an SMS from somebody. Let me tell you, I discussed very openly about Hassan Joho, about these allegations, particularly on himself, with respect to drugs. And he's very open on that conversation. And you see, for those of us who are in the legal fraternity, so is Ambrose, the presumption of innocence is our most fundamental ideal within the jurisprudence or within our constitutional framework. And therefore, I have had extraordinarily candid conversations with him. And I think he talks about it himself often. These days, he's made it his own personal pet undertaking to always talk about it, and is open to questions around it because he knows that smear is not a stench that will go away just without making very, very candid address to it.
Absolutely.
Here's what amazes me about Kenya. One second. Here's what amazes me about Kenya. Corruption is happening every day. Theft is happening every day of NSSF and NHIF and all these. Drug dealing is happening every day. Guess what, Smart? Nobody is doing it. Go figure.
Okay. 10 seconds, Ambrose. We go to the last.
I think the good news that we should have about this drugs business is it appears that the president himself has taken the battle to the extent that when Chinedu was thrown out of this country and they impounded the plane, he said, let them return the plane, whatever it takes, Chinedu will not come back here and we will fight. That is a major leap towards the fight. I heard rumors that in the ODM nominations, the choppers and whatever. So tell your leaders down there that we combine together and fight this menace together as a country.
But don't come, to KTN, don't come to KTN and spread rumors.
Okay.
That's why I said that.
credible.
On the screen for you, hashtag the way it is. We are looking out for your opinions and thoughts. Gentlemen, we might not have an opportunity to next Monday when we meet. There's something phenomenal perhaps would happen on Thursday.
Yes.
That is the Labor Day.
Yes.
It has been a preserve of Kotu. Now there's a new baby in town called Pusetu, who says we need to organize it. Well done. Let me start with you
Yes.
on your thoughts on this.
The problem that has been with Kotu, that is, it is bad to have several unions representing workers. It is not in the interest of the workers. But because their toolies have developed a machinery where you retain the leadership forever and ever, and the law does not limit the terms. You will notice that it was there with Mugala, then Mugala pushed it over to his tribesman, and they have continued.
Are you saying Atwoli has not served the work as well?
He has not. He's only done bling and good speech, but serving the workers, zero. So the result is we have 2 unions. We'll then have 3, then the workers will be weaker and weaker and weaker, and the country will be weaker in terms of the labor movement. So it does not augur well. It would be time for Atwoli to quit and other people to get leadership, and the workers to have one union that can talk on their behalf. Not bling system.
Kotu has been highly visible and has done a very decent job under the leadership and the guidance and the stewardship of Francis Atwoli. I do realize that Atwoli can be unnecessarily dramatic, that his personal lifestyle is in contravention of what he stands for, but I must say that as a champion for the worker and for workers' rights, Atwoli has really been on the money. The culture of exploitation in this country is rife, smart. I think you have analyzed and perhaps been a business reporter. Kenyans work too hard for too little. The cost of doing business is through the roof. Interest rates are through the roof. Everything is against the worker. And so it is no surprise that NSSF has been the pet baby for funding all manner of illegalities, for all manner of looting, along with the fund for NHIF and others. And so Atwoli has really done a good job. And what we must think about with the launch of Pusetu, with all these different government figures, is clearly when you see a lot of noise and a lot of heat, you must follow the money trail. What is the problem and what is under siege? And I believe that there is big money somewhere that is being chased, that somebody is stopping, and that impunity is rearing its head and trying to go for this kill no matter what. And so you've got to ask yourself, what is Pusetu really? What is Pusetu? Where is it coming from with all this government backing? And out of the blue, you were just born last week and you want to preside over Labor Day? Does that make any sense to you at all?
Hassan?
I'm not saying Atwoli is perfect. Never had their challenges. The perception, which I think Benji has alluded to, that you are being created under the sponsorship of a government. Trade unions are constitutionally enshrined movements with the power for collective bargaining, the power to join a union. And therefore, you can't weaken them by government sponsorship to crack central movements. Trade unions are part and parcel of the makeup of a life of any government or any accountability mechanism. To weaken a trade movement is to weaken accountability. With the shortcomings that Kotu has or Atwoli has, there should have been a contest internally. And therefore, this patronage and sponsorship by Kazungu Kambio et al. Is part of the weakening of very noble discourses in this country. And I can tell you, when I tell you that governance is one of the greatest enemy when it comes, good governance for that matter, when it comes to the Jubilee administration, from the word go, they've tried to weaken civil society, police accountability, media, now trade unions. Yeah? Whatever your misgivings about Atwoli.
And how is it they're getting backing?
I'm asking those Pusetu, whatever.
Let me just
I'm asking them to just allow Kotu to do its thing. as a matter of tradition and practice, even as lawyers, you know, there are practices that develop out of tradition and practices. So let them not create confusion on the 1st of May.
Yes.
You know, when you are, people have a culture of throwing mud. If there is any one trade union in this country that has been a problem to any government, it has been the teachers' union. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Even to the Jubilee government, the one that keeps them in the corner, the one that is problematic. So how would they then, the one who has been playing ball, who has been very nice, who has been toothless, talking too much but doing very little, has been a tool. The one which has been problematic has been...
You know, you can, you know, find a cause together, then, you know... You
by strengthening the so person who has quoted, there are a lot of problems.
So
you see, Pusetu is now bigger.
Yes.
Meaning the TSC and the teacher service, not the teacher, the NAT. The NAT would now be stronger. Yet they are the ones who have created the biggest challenge to the government. So to say that Pusetu is being sponsored by the system is actually to say that the government is not acting wise. They would rather do business with their Tuoli who talks but does not do anything, does not call any strike, does not do anything, than empowering NAT, which has members. They would paralyze education, they will paralyze exams, they will do what, then
you could argue, therefore,
but trade unions is not about strike alone. So you see, in fact, I was just about to respond to it. KNUT has not been negotiating on the broader interests of the workers generally. It's about one strike after another. And what their concerns are legitimate. These are concerns that any government will have to meet eventually. And in the meantime, they have the government has appeared to honor part of its collective bargaining or whatever, the instruments that they've agreed to honor. But I think in terms of the broader movement of trade unions, it is got to, because it has to raise the kinds of red flags where, and I can today caution the workers. The minute they appear fractured and disenfranchised, they run the risks of having employers roll over them.
So you could extrapolate from Weda's argument that government has actually looked and seen that the biggest enemy in the workers' movement perhaps is NAT. And so what has it done? It has found a golden egg and co-opted NAT to participate in the devouring of that egg. So be careful with your arguments.
Gentlemen, Anglo-leasing.
I gotta go first on that one. It's a pet subject.
We have allowed you to go first on everything.
Well, go ahead. You don't say you want to go first and then keep quiet.
Go first.
It's because we don't allow you guys to argue amongst yourselves.
No, we don't.
Anglo-leasing was about non-existent companies. Now, the Attorney General, in contravention of common knowledge, common logic and law, wants to go and pay money for non-existent services of non-existent companies. The President of this Republic, while he was Chairman Public Accounts Committee, traveled to England to facilitate investigations on Anglo-leasing companies. They found that the addresses were fake and virtual. So, how do you then sit to do an Anglo-leasing on top of another Anglo-leasing? What is worse is that this whole campaign in the current parliament, the 11th parliament, is being led by a reverend. That is disgusting, Mutava Musimi. So in this country where people are unable to make ends meet, where about 50% cannot hardly go with a meal a day, and where workers are underpaid, whether it's police officers, whether it's teachers, doctors, nurses, you're willing to go to the National Treasury, take money, and give companies. I believe that this is thuggery. I believe that there's a plot in the 11th Parliament to loot funding and to loot taxpayer money. It is unacceptable. It is morally reprehensible. It is disgusting. And Senator, you must add your voice to stop this in its tracks.
Okay, let me add it. Let me add it. I think my position is that of the court coalition. I think when these decisions are made, we all sit as members of the parliamentary group, members of the necks of the various parties, to run through these propositions. And I think there were no services that were delivered. It was a ghost project. I think there have been preliminary investigations. At that time, the finance minister was now the president, made very assertive remarks. Won't pay, can't pay. And I think that is the position. Yes. There will be not a dime of taxpayers that will be lost in some kind of underground, whatever kind of deals. And I think it is morally wrong for any authority to even contemplate the idea of making payments with respect to Anglo-leasing, no matter what the court has held anywhere. We respect the jurisdictions of the courts, but courts must make certain decisions with respect to public interest. And therefore, our view and our position as court, we will fight to the very end. But I'm also happy that I've met quite a number of my Jubilee colleagues, friends in the Senate and the National Assembly, who totally oppose the Anglo-leasing payments. So I think within the political class, we might have the critical mass to just ensure that we stand a firm position that no taxpayers' money will be lost in this scam.
Whether
the Anglo-leasing, I've not done much work on the Anglo-leasing, but
there's nothing to do, they're not there.
This is a case. This is a case where you can say that the government, the reigning government, is between a rock and a hard place. You hit yourself on this side, you are hit. You hit yourself on the other side, you are hurt. Why do I say so? The public, the people of Kenya are all on one side against any payment, yes, regarding this Anglo-leasing things. I do not know whether anything was delivered, but I asked Senator Omar when we were sitting there. He said, yeah, there was a boat which was delivered. That is there. So the public are against it. And the government, having been elected, they want to maintain, to go with the public, or they'll be told you are very corrupt. These are acts that were carried out before they came into power. That is the rock. Now, the hard place is there are court orders at the international level, at the International Trade Court, which has this consequence. You don't pay, you don't deal in the financial markets there, you don't borrow. You are punished for it in other areas, including the IMF, including other institutions. So you don't pay this one, like you don't pay Standard Chartered Bank, Barclays Bank will not allow you to borrow, Equity Bank will not allow. That is the hard place. And that is what the reality that is dawning on the system is, what do we do?
Yeah, and that's what the Attorney General said.
Yes.
That's the reason why they're...
So the Attorney General said, this is the law. You don't pay, it's okay, but you will not get A, B, C, D. Let me just finish. Let me put this case, because court is codifying things. So the Attorney General says, this is the, and that's the reality. Like the reality where you say, if the court, the ICC says Uhuru has to go to ICC, he has to go where there is the president. It's the hard place. Now, that is why it has gone to Parliament, to look at these two difficulties. Do we count our losses as a country? Count our losses, pay up, lose the money, close this chapter in order to gain in other fields, or we refuse and continue suffering. Either way, it is a rock and a hard place. It is a hard reality that we have to go through. I find it hard to accept that we have to pay. But as a lawyer, and a lawyer who understands international obligations, I see the difficulties. Those two should be soberly debated. Those two sides should be soberly debated, both by the court brigade, the Jubilee, and everybody, to see where our interest as a country is best.
These Anglo companies,
we move forward. Allow me to finish. This is now a critical issue of international trade law. This is now not court issues. Let us look at which side
on one point
is, in the long run, the best interest.
Let me give some advice. By their own name, Anglo is, European, of European origin. These countries in the West are beacons of democracy, good governance, etc. So what I would do is I'd refuse to pay with a caveat. Let the president go and meet with the Prime Minister of England and meet with the President of Australia or wherever else these sources are, and let him have that one-on-one and explain that I will not pay, and this is why, and we must be willing to bite the bullet and pay the price, because whether, as you know, corruption in a third world country is a big fat problem. We have a problem with lack of toilets in this country, with sanitary towels for our young girls and boys, with lack of school fees, etc. So we cannot have the luxury of throwing money around in a pit that is a bottomless pit, that is the endemic, serpent of corruption. So I would urge that they don't pay, but with reason. Secondly, let the president look for and find the following: David Miraria, Chris Murungaru, all these other different guys, Wanjigi, whoever, who was doing these deals, and let him hold them personally accountable. You cannot have a thieving administration that enjoys the trappings of power, that is itself, living in white castles, and then you turn around and penalize the underpaid, poor teacher.
We
and
must
worker.
also,
Yes,
we must
Hassan,
also
you cannot.
fight the international financial systems that are oppressive.
Yeah.
And if it is just about getting monies from IMF, I think we can do without for the time being. Even IMF is a bank, it wants to give money. It's not that it's only us who want to take money from them. And secondly, you remember our good friend, our neighbor, Museveni, when they said they were going to cut aid for him because of some gay laws? He says, go ahead. They need us. Don't ever underestimate the fact that we are powerful African nations. And right now is the rise of Africa. And for us to validate corruption, and it's because there is international financial obligation, I think we will just be shooting ourselves in the foot. We'll be going into more and more of these types of deals. And that's said and done. I think I love the positions that has been taken in terms of trying to put this context within the context of Parliament, so that Parliament can give direction. And once Parliament is able to galvanize its unity on this matter, we are willing to stand up against the IMF or any other financial system that wants us to lose taxpayers' money.
Let's attach this to this as we wind up.
Let me just clarify on one thing. A has confirmed the position has been all along that we don't pay as a country. That has been for all these years. It is only that the sanctions are now dawning on the system that you don't pay, these are the consequences. Now it is upon Parliament, now it's upon you people. Whatever you decide, if you think that will be the best interest of the country, carry on.
Carry on. Aaron Ringera appointed Appeal Division of the East African Court of Justice. You also appointed with him. He was supposed to be your chairman in one of the commission that was supposed, to look at the tribunal that didn't take off.
It is unfortunate that Ringera was appointed in a tribunal that was fairly controversial, very controversial, and therefore that controversy, especially breach of court orders and so on. But having known Ringera as a person and as a lawyer and as a judge is one of the finest. That is granted whether I like him or I don't. So if he addresses his mind in the new appointment, if he addresses his mind correctly, that is without politics or other regional inclinations, you have the best. If anybody applies his mind wrongly, then, but he is fine. He's fairly educated,
let me make a
brilliant and a hard worker.
Shocking point about Aaron Ringera. We had a very good working relationship with him when he was the chairman of the Anti-Corruption Commission, director, when we were in the KNCHR. You will be surprised at the work they were doing at that point in time. Let me make an honest confession. Far outmatched that of the KNCHR with respect to the particular areas of mandate. But Ringera was below the radar type of a person. And I remember we telling him, because they supported quite a number of our investigations, because their investigation unit is quite well built up. That's the truth of the matter. And very well resourced. So we asked them sometimes for their interventions and trainings. When we kept telling Justice Ringera that there is need for these types of institutions, and I tell all commissions to build public credibility through communication and media. The lack of public communication, when the people of Kenya do not know what you're doing, no matter what you do, there's a way in which there is lack of appreciation. So therefore, he lacked the communication strategy then. I believe as a professional, I will give him the benefit of doubt in terms of what his appointment. That's a different matrix, it's a different ballgame. And I, being a former judge, I think we hold him to those standards of integrity.
I take a completely different position. I happen to have grown around Aaron Ringera. He was actually a neighbor, so I know him as an uncle. I think he's a decent guy. He's a decent guy, but by and large, his tenure at the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission then was lackluster, absolutely ineffectual. I think that the only thing that Judge Ringera was famous for, and you agree with me, was his salary. I mean, that is what. If you look at Hassan and Oswago, critically and honestly, do these guys look like they really know what they're doing? If you listen to Hassan critically as he explains different things, if you look at all the different, videos and, just different sessions that he's been captured, does he inspire confidence? Does this look to you like a guy who is in charge of a tender of 9 billion that initially began at 3 billion, and then doubled and tripled to bring in BVR kits that failed on the actual day without proper time for due diligence and testing. Look at Isaac Hassan critically and even Oswago. Do these guys look like they know what they're talking about? I posit that they put this country at great risk, and that fortunately it was for the Hague process currently underway that nobody even dared imagine contestation and protestation against these results. Otherwise, they would have put this country again in peril. Because I'll tell you this, as I said at the beginning of the show, the losers do not believe for 1 minute, and they have constituents, that they lost fair and square. They would have sent people to the street again to look, and you cannot put the military everywhere.
Okay.
I want to look at the history of the Electoral Commission. When we began the Electoral Commission to the IPPG, we had a fairly credible Electoral Commission that gave rise to the Kivuitus. When Kibaki reneged on that gentleman agreement
In 2007.
In 2007, in the appointment of the IBC, is where the rain started to beat us.
Yes.
Moi was the gentleman. Kibaki was not. Because there was an arrangement that the opposition had a say in terms of political party strengths. So what will happen?
Supported by Martha Karua.
Absolutely.
Let's be real here.
So if you look at the history of the IBC or the electoral body, for it to be credible, it must have a negotiated type of process of appointment. For me, half of that IBC are people I am not even personal friends. But I think to divorce the personal friendship from business,
it's critical.
It's an extremely critical domain of work. For me, I believe, even let alone the COD constituency, which WEDA acknowledges is half of this country, even if it was 1 Kenyan, or 2 Kenyans, or 3 Kenyans, or even a handful, the credibility of an election comes from the perception of the impartiality and the independence of the electoral body. Right now, they are so tarnished in terms of the credibility and independence to a point where, my view, going into the next election with the composition of IBC as it is untenable. We might not have a recourse by law. We might not have a recourse politically because the numbers overwhelm us in the National Assembly. But the truth is, if they do not search their consciousness and find what is the best interest of the country, we will go into an election and everybody will start to reject the election result.
Can I give you an ugly
scenario? They will create a national...
Can I give you an ugly scenario?
Bring this to a close.
No, but we also must do permutations. We must do permutations. What we don't want, and the reason we're having these discussions early and proactively, is you're going to put, for example, one side of the country on the back foot to where, for example, a leader gets reckless, you go through another election, and they declare absolutely that they're not going to take it anymore, that this is not free and fair, that they're not going to accept the results, and that they're asking their constituents to break off from Kenya. I'm not saying that they would, but they would put the government in a position that forces them, for example, to arrest them. That's what happened in 2008 when the propaganda machinery started sending out SMSs before Michuki blocked them, that Ruto and Raila had been arrested. Basically, these are all possibilities that some of us have to look at that can put this country in great jeopardy, as Wakili Weda tried to allude to. The legitimacy of elections is very important. The legitimacy of a government is extremely important in a democracy. We do not want to count on the goodwill of losers, that Raila is just going to play nice and is not going to do ABCD. These guys could really rile up constituents, and then we have a real problem in this country, from Mombasa to Luo Nyanza to Migori to Kambani to half of Northeastern. I think you get the picture. Thank you very much.
I think I would request our COD wing to stop this bashing of constitutional officers. It is ruining the country. My pain is that negative ethnicity is slowly getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
I would ask the people of Kenya to look back, look at 2007 and see that when the country was burning, all of us were running helter-skelter. And I call upon our leaders, both the president, the deputy, and the COD brigade, to appreciate that the county is bigger
Than any of them.
than any of them.
Indeed, and the show is bigger than individual. We have
Yes.
to end it there.
Thank you very much, James.
It's the way it is.
Ambrose Sweder, Benji Ndolo, Senator Hassan, Omar, thank you very much, and indeed, State House, for watching this morning.
Thank you.
Always appreciate your company. This is the way it is. Don't go for taking a short break. When we come back, we're discussing all matters malaria.
Indeed, one of the deadliest diseases in the world. Stay tuned for that discussion coming up in a short while.